What if the part of you you've spent your whole life hiding is the part that holds your freedom? What if the real you lives in the silence you avoid, the emotion you suppress, the dreams you forget when you wake? Not the self you perform, but the self you abandoned when it stopped feeling safe to be seen. You are not lost, you are buried. And this path is not about becoming someone new, it's about remembering someone ancient, the one who waits in the dark with open hands and eyes that already know you. There's a room inside me I used to pretend didn't exist. I walked past it 1,000 times, never opened the door, never turned the handle, just kept going, busy, distracted, fine. But it was always there, waiting, dark, still. I told myself there was nothing to find, that I had already healed, that the past was over, and the future was all that mattered. But the room didn't care about time. It held every version of me that I didn't want to carry. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, I could hear them whisper, not to scare me, but to remind me that not everything can be left behind. We don't forget what we refuse to feel. We bury it, we disown it, we name it something else. Stress, fatigue, mood swings, imposter syndrome. But underneath all those labels is a part of me still calling for light, a part of me that never stopped hoping I'd return. And when I finally stopped running, when the noise faded and the mirrors cracked, I stood at the door again. No map, no shield, just presence. The handle was cold, the silence louder than ever, but I opened it anyway. And inside, not monsters, not madness, but memory, raw, unfiltered, alive. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine. The sadness I never cried, the anger I never voiced, the dreams I gave up on to stay safe. All of it still there, untouched by time, and waiting not to be solved, but seen. That's when I understood. This room wasn't a punishment, it was a preservation, a place my psyche built to keep the forgotten safe until I was strong enough to carry them. We all have a room like this, a place in the dark where our truth lives quietly, hoping we'll remember. Not because we need to relive it, but because we can't reclaim ourselves without it. This isn't about going backward, it's about going inward. And what I found is this: the light we're looking for doesn't come from the outside. It begins the moment we stop being afraid of the dark. I used to think I was the version of me the world applauded, the one who always said the right thing, held it all together, showed up when it hurt, smiled when it burned. That version got love. That version felt safe. That version survived. But somewhere along the way, I noticed a quiet ache. Not pain exactly, but more like distance, as if I was living slightly outside of myself, performing, polishing, protecting. Because somewhere in my story, I learned that being real meant being rejected. So I built a mask, not to lie, but to belong, lie. And at first it worked. People admired the mask. They clapped for the persona. They asked for more of the surface, but no one asked what lived underneath. And honestly, neither did I. Until one day, I caught my own reflection. Not the polished one, the other one. The one behind the eyes. The tired one, the scared one, the one who hadn't spoken in years. And in that moment, I didn't see weakness. I saw truth. The kind that doesn't perform. The kind that doesn't need applause. That's when I realized the mask didn't protect me. It separated me from connection, from peace, from myself. But letting go of it felt like death. Because who would I be without it? Would I still be loved? Would I still be needed? Would I still be safe? The mind said no. The heart whispered yes. And so I began, slowly, gently, peeling back the layers. Not all at once, not with force, but with presence. And beneath every mask I removed was a version of me I had abandoned, not because she was wrong, but because she was real. And real felt dangerous once, but not anymore. Now I see the beauty in that unfiltered face, the one that doesn't always have the answer, the one that shakes, that doubts, that feels. Because that face, that's the mirror, that's the soul, and no role, no matter how perfect, will ever replace that. You can build a life on performance, but it will never satisfy the self. Only truth can do that. And the truth is this: you are not your mask. You never were. You are the one behind it, always watching, always waiting, always hoping you'd return. There were nights when I thought the silence was empty, just space, just nothing. But now I know, silence is never empty. It's full of everything we haven't faced yet. It holds the things we've buried, the truths we've postponed, the voices we told to hush because we didn't yet have the strength to listen. I used to fill the quiet with noise, music, screens, words, movement, anything to drown the stillness, because stillness felt dangerous, like something was waiting there just beneath the surface, ready to pull me under. But it wasn't danger, it was depth. The silence I ran from was never trying to hurt me, it was trying to speak. It whispered through tension in my chest. It echoed in choices that didn't fit. It stirred in relationships where I vanished to be loved. But I called it just a phase. I'm tired. I'll figure it out later. I gave it names that made it easier to ignore. Because if I really listened, I'd have to change. And change asks everything of you. Not just your habits, but your story, your identity, your comfort. Eventually, though, the silence got louder. Not with sound, but with presence. I couldn't distract it anymore. I couldn't outpace it. I couldn't numb it for long. So I sat. Not because I was brave, but because I was tired of running. And slowly, the silence began to speak, not in sentences, but in sensations, images, symbols, feelings I had no words for, only truth. It told me what I missed, what I mourned, what I needed, what I never gave myself permission to want. And in that space, I learned something sacred. Silence isn't the absence of meaning. It's the container that holds all meaning. It doesn't shout, because it knows it doesn't have to, but you have to stop long enough to hear it, to let it teach you, to let it show you the parts of yourself that only grow in the dark. And when you do, you realize you were never alone. The echo you thought was emptiness was your own soul calling you home. There are pieces of me I thought I'd lost forever. Moments, versions, instincts I used to trust. I used to mourn them like they'd died, like they belonged to someone I could never be again. But grief wasn't the right word, because they weren't gone. They were just hidden, tucked away in old memories, buried beneath decisions I made to survive, wrapped in silence behind the roles I learned to play. They didn't leave me. I left them, quietly. One small compromise at a time, a laugh that felt too loud, a question that made others uncomfortable, a dream that didn't match the world I grew up in. Each time I adjusted, I told myself it was maturity, responsibility, wisdom. But now I see what it really was, a slow forgetting of the self, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't feel safe. And the psyche, it protects what matters. When something inside me felt too tender to be exposed, it retreated inward, into memory, into dreams, into symbols I wouldn't understand until much later. But it never disappeared. The self doesn't vanish. It fractures, it scatters, it waits. And if you're quiet enough, if you pay attention, you'll start to feel the weight of what you left behind, not as regret, but as invitation. A tug in your chest when a childhood joy resurfaces, a flicker of curiosity in the middle of your routine, a dream that wakes you feeling both strange and strangely known. These are not accidents. They are fragments, pieces of you asking to come home, not to rewind time, but to be remembered now, in this body, with this awareness. Because integration isn't about being one thing, it's about making room for all the things you've ever been, all the parts you hid to belong, all the feelings you tucked away to be strong, all the truths you whispered to yourself in the dark. They were never weaknesses, they were roots. And they're still there, not demanding, not shouting, just waiting for you to say, I remember you. And when you do, you begin to feel whole again, not perfect, not polished, but real. Because wholeness doesn't come from adding more. It comes from reclaiming what was always yours. There's a child who stands at the edge of my memory, not lost, just waiting. She doesn't say much. She doesn't need to. Because I know who she is. I remember her laugh, how it filled a room without apology. I remember how she asked questions with no fear of being wrong. How she reached for what she loved without checking first if it was allowed. She didn't worry about being too much. She didn't know the rules yet. She simply was. And then the world began to speak. Soft at first, then louder, correcting, shaping, shrinking. Be careful, be quiet, be good, be less. She listened. Of course she did. Because love felt like approval and safety looked like obedience. So she stepped back. She made herself smaller. She became who she needed to be to stay connected. And I watched her fade, not all at once, but slowly, as life taught her that being herself came with consequences. But she never left, not really. She just stepped aside, moved to the threshold of my psyche, that place between memory and presence, between who I was and who I pretended to be. And now, I feel her again. She tugs at me when I say yes too quickly. She sighs when I laugh at things that don't feel funny. She cries in moments I don't understand, because some part of her remembers what my adult self has tried to forget. She is not naive. She is not fragile. She is the part of me untouched by performance. And she is wise. Wiser than I ever gave her credit for. Because beneath the innocence was clarity. Before the mask, there was truth. And in her eyes, there's still something unbroken. She doesn't need to be rescued. She needs to be received. And I am ready now. Ready to stop managing my emotions like they're problems to solve. Ready to stop proving my worth through exhaustion and control. Ready to open the door to the version of me that felt whole without effort. The child is not a relic. She is a compass. And the closer I move toward her, the more honest my life becomes. She stands at the threshold still, not to pull me back, but to welcome me forward. Into a life where truth leads and love doesn't require hiding. Sometimes I react before I understand why. A word, a tone, a glance, and suddenly I'm spiraling, angry, defensive, quiet, gone. And I tell myself, it's not a big deal, but my body tells another story, a tighter chest, a faster pulse, a voice in my head that speaks too loud and too fast. The moment may be new, but the feeling isn't. That's how I know. It's not the present I'm reacting to. It's the past surfacing. Underneath the reaction, there's a voice I haven't heard in a long time, a younger voice, one I've ignored, dismissed, outgrown. But she never stopped speaking. She just learned to speak through the body instead. And every time I flinch, every time I shut down, every time I over-explain or over-apologize, she's the one speaking, not in words, but in instinct. She's trying to keep me safe, trying to protect me the only way she knows how. By remembering what once hurt and doing anything to avoid it again. It's not sabotage, it's survival. But now, I'm older and safer and stronger than I was then. So I listen. I ask, what are you afraid of? What do you need me to understand? And slowly the reaction softens. Because when we listen to the voice beneath the reaction, we stop fighting ourselves. We stop blaming the surface and start healing the source. Because every overreaction has a root. Every numb moment has a memory. Every explosion, withdrawal, or panic was once a child's attempt to feel okay in a world that didn't feel safe. And the more I acknowledge that child, the less she has to scream. She doesn't need to be silenced. She needs to be held, listened to, seen. So now when the reaction rises, I don't shame it. I meet it. I pause, breathe, and say, I hear you. I've got this now. Because that's what healing really is. Not erasing the old responses, but responding to them with compassion instead of fear. You can't hate the part of you that once protected your life, but you can help it rest. You can let it know that it doesn't have to carry everything anymore, and in that space between trigger and choice, a new story begins. One that isn't written by wounds, but by awareness. There are parts of me I used to call wrong, too angry, too jealous, too needy, too much. I locked them away, not because I hated them, but because I was afraid of what they meant, what they revealed, what others might see. I was taught to fear the dark within, to perform goodness, to polish the surface, to hide the chaos, and for a long time it worked. On the outside I looked fine. On the inside I was at war with myself, until I met the shadow. Not as a concept, not in a book, but in a quiet moment when everything fell apart and there was nothing left to perform. It rose like smoke, familiar, heavy, and yet mine. It didn't scream, it didn't accuse, it simply stood there, with all the parts of me I'd buried. The envy I never voiced, the judgments I disowned, the hunger for love I disguised as independence, the rage I swallowed with smiles. This was the shadow, not a villain, but a mirror. And it wasn't asking to be fixed, it was asking to be faced, because the shadow doesn't punish, it reveals. It shows you the parts of yourself you abandoned to be accepted. It carries the pain you weren't allowed to feel, the truths you weren't ready to hold. And when you finally stop running, you see what it really is, a collection of lost selves, the honest ones, the emotional ones, the primal, intuitive, feeling ones, pushed into the dark because someone once told you they didn't belong in the light. But they do. They always have, because you cannot be whole if you keep pretending you're only made of light. You are both, fire and ash, sun and storm, wound and wisdom, and when you meet your shadow, you don't collapse, you expand, you make space for contradiction, you soften the edges of shame, you reclaim your fullness, not to indulge every impulse, but to stop pretending they don't exist, because awareness isn't permission, it's peace. And when you walk with your shadow, you stop being afraid of yourself. You stop projecting what you don't accept. You stop punishing the parts of you that were only trying to survive. You realize your shadow isn't here to destroy you. It's here to return you to the self you left behind. And it will wait, in silence, in dreams, in reactions, until you are ready to say, I see you, I hear you, you belong. There's a kind of fear that doesn't feel like panic. It's subtle, almost quiet. It doesn't shout danger. It whispers, be careful, don't grow too fast. I used to think this fear meant something was wrong, that I should stop, slow down, stay where I was. But now I understand. This fear isn't warning me. It's protecting me, not from the world, but from change. Because change, even when it's good, asks something sacred of us. It asks us to leave behind the version of ourselves who kept us safe when safety was a story we had to create. And that version of me, she worked hard. She learned how to keep the peace, how to hide her emotions, how to shrink just enough to be acceptable. She adapted to survive, and she did it well. So now when I grow, when I speak, when I set a boundary, when I step into the light, that older version trembles. Not because she's weak, but because she remembers what it cost her to be seen. She remembers the silence that followed honesty, the distance that followed vulnerability, the rejection that followed truth. And so she whispers, don't go too far, don't be too free, it's safer to stay small. It's not sabotage, it's loyalty, loyalty to the self that carried me through the dark, loyalty to the protector I once needed, loyalty to pain, because pain was once proof that I mattered. But I don't need to be loyal to suffering anymore. I don't need to guard a version of me that was built in survival. Now, I'm building in wholeness, and that means fear will still come, but I don't have to obey it. I can listen with compassion without letting it steer. I can say, I know you're scared, but we're not in that place anymore, because growth isn't a betrayal of who you were. It's an evolution of who you are. And fear, when understood, becomes tenderness. It becomes a reminder of how hard you've worked to protect yourself and how ready you are now to live differently. So I thank the fear I don't fight it. I let it speak, then I move anyway, not recklessly but consciously. Because courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the trust that something deeper is now guiding you. And the self I'm becoming, she's not afraid of the dark. She remembers it. But she doesn't live there anymore. There was a time when I learned to wear a mask. Not one I put on in the morning, but one I built slowly, moment by moment, every time I adjusted myself to be accepted. It started small, a softened opinion, a fake laugh, a silence where there should have been truth. And it worked. People liked the version of me who knew how to please, how to make others comfortable, how to disappear just enough to be loved. It didn't feel like lying. It felt like survival. Because when you're young, love often comes with conditions. Be good, be quiet, be easy to handle. And so the self becomes split. There's the one who feels and the one who performs, the one who wants and the one who waits for permission. We call the performance personality. We call the mask maturity. We call the distance strength. But underneath it all is a very simple truth. The mask helped us be loved, but not seen. And being loved without being seen leaves a hollow ache that nothing can quite fill. So we chase more approval, more perfection, more control, thinking that maybe if we get it just right, we'll finally feel whole. But wholeness never comes from performance, it comes from presence. And presence requires risk. The risk of being misunderstood, of being too much, of disappointing the image others built around you. That's what makes removing the mask so hard. It's not just about identity, it's about belonging. Because you start to wonder, if they loved the mask, will they still love me? And the answer is, maybe not. But that's not the point. The point is, do you love you? The one who doesn't always agree, the one who feels deeply, the one who stopped pretending just to keep the peace. Because when you remove the mask, you don't become someone new. You return to someone real, someone you left behind the moment you believed being yourself wasn't enough. But now you know, the mask was never the problem. It served its purpose. It kept you safe when safety was earned through performance. But you're not there anymore. And the version of you who wants to breathe can't do it through filters. So take it off, not all at once, just one breath at a time. Let them see your edges. Let them hear your truth. Let them meet the soul that lives beneath the performance. And if they don't stay, bless their exit. Because the ones who matter won't fall in love with the mask. They'll fall in love with the mirror behind it, the one that reflects everything you were always meant to be. There's a language I didn't know I was fluent in, one made not of words but of symbols, a language that speaks while I sleep and lingers in the space between waking and remembering. Dreams. I used to brush them off, call them strange, random, meaningless. But that was before I understood how the unconscious speaks. Not in logic, not in straight lines, but in metaphors, images, riddles, in stories that don't always make sense but always mean something, because the soul is not literal, it's layered. And dreams are the letters it sends when we forget how to listen. There were nights when I stood in burning houses, flew through skies that made no sense, held the hand of someone long gone, fell, rose, drowned, woke up crying with no idea why. And yet, some part of me always knew what it meant. Not consciously, but viscerally, in my chest, in the way my day shifted because something inside had stirred. Dreams carry what we won't admit. They hold the pieces we don't know how to face while awake. The shadow speaks there. So does the child. So does the self. Not to confuse us, but to show us what we've hidden, to bring shape to what's been lost in fog. And when we begin to pay attention, the dreams change. not because they become clearer, but because we become willing. Willing to let symbols teach us, willing to see meaning in mystery, willing to walk through the landscapes of our own unconscious with curiosity, not control. Because dreams aren't puzzles to solve. They're invitations to feel, to witness, to remember. They remind us that healing isn't just mental, it's mythic, that we are not just minds in bodies, but stories unfolding in time. So now, when a dream visits me, I don't ask, what does it mean? I ask, what is it showing me about myself? Is there a part of me in danger? A desire I've buried? A fear I've ignored? Sometimes the answers are clear. Other times they echo for weeks before revealing their truth in a moment I didn't expect. That's the beauty of dream work. It's not linear, it's alive. And the more I listen, the more I realize my dreams have always known me. Even when I didn't, for a long time, I thought healing meant fixing. That if I could just correct all the broken parts, smooth the edges, rewrite the story, delete the past, I'd finally become someone worth being. But integration doesn't work like that. It's not a clean process. It doesn't move in straight lines or tidy conclusions, because you're not a problem. You're a person. And people are made of contradictions, light and shadow, love and grief, courage and fear. You're not here to become perfect. You're here to become whole. Wholeness doesn't mean nothing hurts. It means nothing is hidden. It means standing inside your life with all its pieces and saying, I will not throw any of this away. Even the parts that still ache, even the mistakes you'd rather forget, even the behaviors you're still learning how to unlearn. Because those parts shaped you, they protected you, they walked you through fire when no one else did. And now, they deserve to rest, not by being erased, but by being welcomed back. That's what integration asks of us. Not to be better, but to be honest. To let the wounds breathe without rushing them. To let the child speak without correcting her. To let the shadow show up without shame. It's not comfortable, but it's real. And in that realness, there's peace. Not the peace of everything going right, but the peace of no longer running from yourself. You don't have to be fixed to be worthy of love. You don't have to be finished to be enough. You just have to show up, fully, messily, present. And when you do, you stop needing approval to feel like you belong, because you begin to belong to yourself. That's the gift of integration, not flawlessness, but freedom. The freedom to feel without judgment, to change without fear, to love yourself, not in spite of your past, but because you faced it. You are not a puzzle to complete. You are not a project to improve. You are a soul remembering its shape. And every part of you, even the ones that don't fit the image, belong in that picture, not as decoration, but as truth. There are wounds I once tried to hide from the world, wounds I wrapped in silence, masked with smiles, buried beneath strength I didn't truly feel. I thought if I could just ignore them long enough, they would disappear. But wounds don't vanish, they wait. They wait for the moment you finally stop running, the moment you're still enough to feel. Not because they want to hurt you, but because they want to be heard. And what I've come to learn is this: the wound is not the end, it's the beginning, the doorway. Pain doesn't come to punish you, it comes to awaken you, to show you where love is missing, to remind you of what you need, to reveal the parts of yourself you've been living without. And yes, it hurts, not because you're weak, but because you're alive. Pain is the proof that something inside you still wants to be whole. We spend so much time trying to escape it. We numb, avoid, distract. We say, I'm fine, when we're anything but. But underneath all that denial is a single quiet truth. What hurts is trying to teach you something. Sometimes it's a boundary that was never learned. Sometimes it's a voice that was never heard. Sometimes it's love that was never given. Whatever the lesson, the wound holds it, not to shame you, but to open you. Because the deepest healing doesn't happen when everything is okay. It happens when you sit beside your pain and say, I'm not leaving. You don't need to fix it all at once. You don't need to understand every layer. You just need to stay present, to feel what you once couldn't, to hear what was once silenced, to grieve what was once taken. And when you do, the wound softens. Not because it disappears, but because you've given it what it always needed. Your attention, your compassion, your presence. You realize that pain is not your enemy. It's your threshold, the crossing point between who you've been and who you're becoming. And on the other side of it, not in spite of it, but because of it, you begin to find yourself again, not the polished version, not the one who's got it all together, but the real one, the one who walked through fire and chose to feel anyway, the one who knows that healing isn't about erasing the wound. It's about becoming someone who can live freely with it, and in that space you become whole. I used to think healing was about becoming someone new, a better version, a stronger version, someone wiser, quieter, more enlightened. But the deeper I go, the more I realize wholeness is not about becoming. It's about returning, not to who I was before the pain, but to the one who has always been there, beneath the pain, beside the fear, inside the silence, the self, not the ego, not the persona, but the still center I abandoned when I thought survival required pretending. And now I see the journey isn't linear, it's circular, spiral-shaped, layered. I revisit the same emotions, the same lessons, but from new places. Wider vision, softer heart, deeper presence. Each time I return, I bring more of myself back. Not to repeat, but to remember. Because this is not about perfection. It's about integration, bringing together what was scattered, welcoming home what I once rejected. And the path of returning is not always gentle. Some days I grieve the time I spent performing, other days I bless it, because it gave me the contrast that now makes truth unmistakable. The old self isn't wrong, she's part of the story. But she's not the whole story, and neither is the mask, neither is the fear, neither is the trauma. I am more than what happened to me, more than who I became to survive it, more than the shadow, more than the light. I am the space that holds both, and in that space, I stop chasing healing as if it's a destination. I stop measuring my growth by how much I've avoided pain, because real healing is humble, quiet, present. It shows up in the way I breathe through discomfort, in the way I pause before reacting, in the way I choose love without losing myself. That's how I know I'm returning, not because I've changed everything, but because I've started to recognize myself again, the one who dreamed in symbols, the one who cried easily, the one who knew how to feel before the world said it was too much. She's still here, and so is the one who learned to armor up, and so is the one who began to take it off. All of them, together, form the self, not as a fixed identity, but as an ongoing unfolding, a home I carry within me, a compass that doesn't point outward but inward, always inward. Wholeness isn't a finish line, it's a returning, again and again, each time with more truth, more grace, and more of me. There's a kind of silence that doesn't ask for anything, it doesn't demand answers, it doesn't need movement, it simply waits, soft and wide, like a space inside the soul that knows everything already. I didn't always trust silence. There was a time when it felt like absence, like loneliness dressed in quiet, like something missing. But that was before I learned to sit in it, to stop filling it with noise and doing and fixing, to stop treating stillness as something to survive. Because when I stopped running, silence became something else entirely. It became presence, not empty, but full of breath, of memory, of self. The silence started to hold me, not like a question, but like a mirror. It showed me the rhythm beneath the roles, the voice beneath the reaction, the self I used to override in the name of being productive, pleasing, perfect. It's in silence that I remembered how to feel again, not perform feeling, but simply feel. The grief I swallowed, the joy I postponed, the questions I never dared to ask, they all came back not with force, but with gentleness. That's the thing no one tells you. The psyche doesn't heal through pressure. It heals through permission, through softness, through stillness that says, you can stop now, I'm listening. And in that space, I heard things I didn't know I'd forgotten. The laughter of a younger self, the echo of a dream that never fully left, The sound of my own breath, steady, real, enough. Silence is not a void. It's a doorway. And on the other side is everything you tried to remember through effort, but can only recall through surrender. You don't have to search so hard. You don't have to fix so much. You don't have to earn your way back to yourself. You just have to stop long enough to let the self catch up to you. And when it does, you realize something sacred. You were never truly lost, only distant, only distracted, only wrapped in noise loud enough to drown the truth. But the truth never left. It was always here, inside the silence. You were too busy to hear. And now, as you breathe in stillness, you begin to feel it, not as an idea, but as a knowing. This is what home sounds like. This is what the soul feels like when it stops shouting and simply waits to be noticed. And in that moment, you are held, not by words, not by answers, but by something deeper than both. The silence that remembers who you really are. There's a part of me I thought I'd never find again. Buried so deep beneath years of adaptation that I began to wonder if it ever truly existed. The one who didn't perform, didn't please, didn't shrink, the one who simply was. I searched everywhere, in books, in people, in practices and philosophies, but no matter how far I reached, something always felt just out of grasp, until I stopped reaching, until I turned inward and followed the thread back through the shadows, through the silence, through the places I once feared to look. And there, at the center of it all, in the quietest place I'd been avoiding, was her, still, soft, unchanged, the self, not the one I built to be accepted, not the one I shaped to survive, but the original, the eternal, the one who never left. She didn't scold me for forgetting. She didn't demand proof that I was ready. She simply looked at me as if to say, I've been here all along. And in that moment, I understood something I'd spent years trying to name. The self doesn't need to be found. It needs to be faced. It waits patiently, beneath every mask, beneath every wound, beneath every story you told yourself to keep from falling apart. And when you're finally ready to stop pretending, it steps forward, not as a breakthrough, but as a remembering, not with fireworks, but with stillness. Because the real you was never missing, only covered, only quieted, only wrapped in the dust of everything you thought you had to become. And as I stood with her, I felt something shift. Not a dramatic change, but a return. A breath I didn't know I was holding. A truth I'd forgotten how to trust. This is the self, not perfect, not polished, but whole. And the more I listen, the more I live from her center, the less I need from the world to feel real. Because now I know my worth was never out there. It was never in applause or roles or achievements. It was always in this presence, this remembering, this quiet reunion with the one who waited in the dark until I was ready to see in the dark. And now that I've seen her, I can never go back, not to pretending, not to pleasing, not to believing I have to earn my place in the world, because I am here and I am whole, not because I became someone new, but because I remembered who I've always been. The journey doesn't end in the light. It ends in the moment you no longer fear the dark, because you've walked through it, sat with it, made peace with what lived there. And now you see differently, not through fear, not through the old patterns, but through presence. This is the gift of the inner path, not that the world changes, but that your eyes do. You begin to recognize things as they are, people as they are, yourself without distortion. The illusion fades, the masks dissolve, and what's left is something ancient and whole that lives behind your eyes and beneath your words. Awareness, clarity, vision, not the kind that predicts the future, but the kind that knows how to stand still in the middle of confusion and not flinch. Because you've been here before. You've seen the shadow. You've listened to the child. You've opened the door you once promised never to touch again. And you did not break. You did not fall apart. You came alive. The world will still challenge you. The old fears may knock again. But you are not who you were when this began. Now you see from the center. Not from the wound. Not from the mask. Not from the story. You see from the self. The part of you that doesn't need to prove anything. the part that holds silence like a friend, not a threat. And from this place you become the light, not a spotlight, not a flame that burns, but a steady glow that knows how to sit in darkness and still see truth. You carry that light now, not because everything is fixed, but because everything is known. Even the pain, even the questions, even the parts still unraveling. You see it all and you stay. You stay with yourself. You stay with the moment. You stay with the path, because it is yours. And now, so are you. You don't have to seek anymore. You don't have to become. You just have to return again and again to the knowing that you were never separate from the light. You were just learning how to see it from within. And now you do. If something in this journey stirred something in you, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, what part of me is ready to be seen? Let me know in the comments what this opened for you. And if this stayed with you, or gently woke something in you, please consider subscribing.